You spoke and I listened. So today I'm going to share with you guys my planted Cardinal Tetra tank that's got double-digit species of plants and a lot more than just Cardinal Tetras. A huge thank you to everyone who voted in the poll. If you guys aren't aware, I put out a viewer's choice poll on my community tab last week. If you go to my channel page and then you click over to community, I think you can do it on desktop or mobile, and then you could see the different posts I share, and I'll put some viewers choice polls there. This is the second one I've done. We're going to do another one next month, so definitely keep an eye there and vote in those polls. I really appreciate you guys participating. This tank is definitely one of my favorites, and I'm sure I'll say that about every tank at one point or another, but I think that's the point of having a bunch of different fish tanks and enjoying different things. As you can see, these are some guppies. We'll get to the Cardinal Tetras in a second, but a big shout out to my local friend. I call him Guppy John. He actually goes by Florida Aquatics. He actually does a lot more than just guppies. He's into plecos and a bunch of others, some shrimp, but these are some culls of his that he bred, and these are a steel nebula line, and his main line has more purple in it, but yeah, these are just beautiful guppies. I'm not much of a guppy person, but I'm hanging on to these. He actually gave me, I don't know, a few trios of two dozen maybe, and I gave him to some other friends and kept a few. So a big shout out to John, aka Florida Aquatics. They're eating on some of this algae wafer. That's some of the Aquatic Arts algae wafer that I've been talking about in a few videos lately. Everything seems to like it. Like I said, I put this in here a few minutes ago. The snails are starting to jump on it. The guppies are even picking at it, even though I fed them before I started filming the video. I've never seen the Cardinal Tetras pick at it. They usually just stick to the flake food I feed them. They're pretty shy. Leave a comment down below if you keep Cardinal Tetras. This is the first one I've ever kept them. I bought, I think it was 10 or a dozen, and I have 7 remaining. I lost a few over the first few months, and then these 7 have kind of got fat and healthy, and I think I'm going to pick up some more. And actually, after listening to a podcast recently, I may look to get some wild Cardinal Tetras. Now, if you're like me, you're semi into the environment. I don't pretend to be the most active person doing everything I can in my ability, donating to this and there, but I like to think I'd like to try when I can to do the right thing for the environment. And in my mind, that would be buying farm-raised fish. And actually, after listening to an episode of the Aquarius podcast, if you're not subscribed to the Aquarius podcast, definitely check it out. Randy does a great job and has amazing guests. But one of his guests recently was Scott Dowd, who's with Project Piaba. I won't get too far into it because I'm already on a tangent here, but give it a listen. And essentially, long story short, it turns out that buying wild fish, especially these Cardinal Tetras, can really help support a local community. And they're doing some really cool things to kind of help spread that word and maybe make it so we can track our fish from our fish tanks back to the the river they were caught in, which to me sounds like some really cool futuristic stuff. But judging on these guys' passion, inspiration, sounds like they may make it happen sooner rather than later. But I digress, guys. Back to the tank here. The Cardinal Tetras were the main focus of this tank. I didn't mean to have the guppies. They're just kind of a happy addition. They probably won't stay in this tank long term. But like kind of most of these tanks, they're just kind of, they're flowing. I have general kind of ideas of what I like, but I'm always keep my mind open and learning new things. This is one of the tanks where the plants are doing pretty good. My beta tank probably got the best plants going on, but in this tank, this Dwarf Sag is really kind of carpeting. It's not getting too tall, and it's staying fairly, carpet lace, which is kind of cool. There's quite a few Crips that are growing and propagating nice and getting a kind of a darker color. I'm really bad with the species names of these different Crips, so drop a comment down below if you know. I think this is like a common Wendeti, but I do have some more rare Crips over here. I bought some pink Flamingo Crips a few months back, and it was my first tissue culture, and I was actually able to get about almost double-digit crowns, and some of them were super, super tiny crowns, but they were crowns nonetheless. And if you guys aren't familiar, a crown is just like kind of that little piece, essentially something you could grow a plant with. And I put 2 of the smallest ones in here. That's one of them right there, and another one's right there. They haven't really took off a ton, and I'll profile them in other tanks that have grown a little better, but they're just a cool kind of unique crypt. that I do have. You'll notice some bacopa. There's a few stems of bacopa growing here. That's growing, fairly well, not the greatest. There's a few other stem plants here in the front, and we have some Java fern, which in this tank isn't doing so well, which is kind of par for the course for me. There's a piece there on that piece of driftwood, as well as some here on the rocks, and it's all just kind of eh. It wasn't the greatest when it came in, but it really hasn't done much, and hopefully I'm being patient with it. If I've learned anything with plants, especially Java fern, there's a big one there that kind of just looks like, it's deteriorating, but hopefully it'll get adjusted. Like I said, if I've learned anything with plants, it's patience, and a lot of times, don't give up on a plant. Let it sit there, and it'll come back in most cases. As you can see, this driftwood, this Malaysian driftwood, and my plan was to kind of cover it in some moss. If you can see over here, there's some moss on it, but the moss over here kind of didn't hold and drifted away. There's little pieces here and there, but I need to get back in here and reapply some moss onto this driftwood, because I do love the way this kind of scape is. I didn't really have a huge theme, but I just kind of put a bunch of rocks over here with some driftwood and a melon sword. I believe it's a red melon sword. That's what I bought it as, at least. And then kind of the driftwood jotting out this way, and then another piece kind of cross-sectioning it to the left. And I don't know, I like it. It's one of my wife's favorite tanks. Sometimes when people come over, they kind of really enjoy this tank. I think it's a little brighter and more green than some of the other tanks. There's a dwarf lily here that looks like it's starting to send up a lily pad, perhaps. Some of the other tanks, they're starting to go. I haven't seen a lily in a tank in a while, but some of the other ones are starting to go. So maybe this one will shoot one up to the top. And speaking of the top, I got some dwarf water lettuce. I recently put some dwarf water lettuce in here. I like to kind of spread out plants just to make sure they do okay. With these floating plants, it's always a give and take. It's an experiment to see if it's going to work in the tank or not. As you can see already, this one to the right already has some kind of water collecting on the leaves. That's a bad sign. It probably means they're not going to do well, or at least that one isn't. Typically, I have glass tops on all these tanks, or tops at least, and typically when I plant a tank, I'm not saying you can't have it planted with floaters with a cover on the top, but when you get that condensation on the leaves, most floaters don't really do well when they build up that condensation. But I really do love the look of the dwarf water lettuce root system. They're kind of like a frog bit, but they don't get as long. I really like that in all tanks, especially shrimp tanks, because the shrimp kind of climb up and down them. Other plant here is this frog pit. This is hornwort. Hornwort, I actually just pulled some out of here. Hornwort, if you guys keep hornwort, it's probably your best growing plant too. It's got to be my best growing plant. It kind of gets everywhere. I don't mind it, but I do some trimming, because before I shot this video, this hornwort probably covered almost all the way to that drain up there, and it had been, I don't know, probably a month and a half since I picked some out. So it grows fairly quick for some basic fluorescent lighting here, just like all my tanks. This is the basic fluorescent bulb. In terms of substrate for the plants, there's a really cool story behind this substrate. This is actually eco-complete. And if you guys have followed me for a while, I don't buy many things brand new. This whole rack system is, 2x4s and cinder blocks. Yeah, I bought those new, but it's a cheap way to do it. All these tanks you see in this rack system were bought used, except for a few 10 gallons I got at the $1 per gallon sale. The lights, all the stuff I get are used. A lot of the fish, the plants, I try to get everything as possible off Craigslist, Let Go, OfferUp, etc. I have whole playlists on how to do that stuff. And this substrate was no different. I really like Eco-Complete. I'll probably end up buying some someday, maybe, who knows. But for right now, I'm still on the budget plan, and I actually got this for free on Let Go about a year ago. It was one of my first big finds when I went to get all these 20-gallon tanks. A gentleman was moving, had some Eco-Complete, and he left and moved out of his house a few days before I was able to pick it up. And he left it on the side of his house with a bunch of other junk. So I felt, I felt a little weird. But nonetheless, I ended up digging through his trash on the side of his house, because I knew he had left a box of Eco-Complete for me, grabbed it, and here it is a year later, growing my carpet of Dwarf and these Crips just perfectly. So big shout out to that gentleman wherever you move to. Hope everything's great for you. I'm really, getting the use out of this Eco-Complete, and I'm glad it didn't get thrown away. I really like that about this hobby. I've found that most people in the hobby are good people. They try to want to do other things. He could have easily just tossed it out, but instead he listed on Let Go for free and said, hey, I'm moving, anyone wants to get it. Not only that, he worked with me to give me something for free. So that was really cool of him. Back to the fish tank. I know I kind of rambled on there. I apologize. In terms of future plans for this tank, I definitely want to build up the school of Cardinal Tetra some more. I didn't even mention the calico bristlenose plecos in here. That's because they're always hiding. I'll throw some footage of them. I really love these guys. They've grown. I've got some footage in a few other recent videos. They're always chilling back here. There's one right there. Actually, you can kind of see him or her half down in the rocks. There's 4 juveniles, sub-adults. There's 1 or 2. You can see another one there, kind of this tail sticking up, her tail sticking up. I won't disturb them now. I was hoping they would come out with the when I fed, but they'll probably come out when the lights get turned off. But I'm hoping to breed those guys soon. It should happen in this tank. There's a good chance, even though I don't really have a cave set aside, like I said, I did see 1 male with bristles, so that typically means they are, of age, he's sexually active, or, he can reproduce. So if there's another female, they could be on eggs right now on those rocks, and I would never know. So that's another goal for this tank. The snail population, I don't really mind too much. This is kind of my holding tank for my puffers. I have 2 dwarf pea puffers right now, and I kind of want to get my hands on a larger puffer, not like a Maboo puffer, a kind of maybe a group of South American puffers or a Shidenti puffer. Eventually, later this year, not anytime soon. But this is kind of like a grow out for snails. There's actually a few assassin snails patrolling just to make sure the population doesn't get too out of control. But as you guys can see, there's already a good amount of ram's horn and Malaysian trumpet snails, which I'm not too worried about. I also want to upgrade the lights eventually. I'm not in a rush to do that, but I'd like to do that on all the tanks just to get a little more, better growth on these plants. Let me know in the comments down below. Is there any, what else would you guys do with this tank? In addition to adding some more to the herd of Cardinal Tetras, like I said, these guppies aren't going to be here forever. So it'll be the Cardinal Tetras, there'll be the calico plecos. What else do you think would be another good addition? Probably another, a fish that swims as opposed to a bottom feeder. But let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious as to your opinion. I appreciate you guys watching, especially to the end. Definitely keep tuned for more, viewers' choice stuff. I want to get you guys involved, as much as possible. If you have any ideas on how I can get you guys involved, other than just, suggesting some of the, tanks we take a look into, drop me down a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. As always, stay positive and stay passionate.